Great. So a lot of people have got through the lobby, so that's great. So let's start. So thank you for coming this morning. Hopefully this will be a really useful session for you. We've summarized our information so that we're showing fewer slides so that we have a little bit more time to look at your questions, and you had the opportunity when you signed up to Eventbrite to introduce pre-submitted questions, so we'll be answering as many of those as we can. But great. Next slide, please. So just quickly, so we'll look at the April 2024 SPS controls for animal products, a brief overview, then we'll go into the border control posts and the charging, the checks and inspection, information on transit, and then we'll tell you a little bit more about our other resources and our engagement to help you meet the 30th of April changes. And afterwards, then there will be a Q&A with our DEFRA leads. The session won't cover HMRC or specific risk categorizations. So I'm Nicola Kelly. I work in the comms and engagement sphere at BBTP DEFRA. My colleagues Sarah Johns and Olu Adedokan will also be working on the presentation. And then for the Q&A, we have John Briggs and Richard Watson and Harris Alman to answer your questions. So first up, we have the poll. It'd be really great if you can get involved, as you have so well in all the previous webinars. This really helps us to understand where you're at, what's important to you. Questions coming up now on your screen. So the first question, how well does your organisation understand the changes to import controls that will be introduced from the 30th of April 2024? So just choose one of those multiple choice answers and press submit. We really value your help here because it will help us to tailor how we communicate to you and really understand where you need extra support. At the end, as I said earlier, we'll have a Q&A. So if you look up to the top of your screen, you'll see that black strip there. And if you press on Q&A during the team session, you can add in a question that you'd like to have answered, and you can also upvote the ones you'd like to see answered too. So you can use the Q&A function also. Great. So first of all, let's give you an overview of the documentary and physical checks from the 30th of April 2024, the import controls for animal products. So what changes will traders see from the 30th of April 2024? So starting from the left-hand side of the chart, so for imports from EU and EFTA countries except Ireland, all imports of animal products that are subject to SPS controls, so that's products currently exempt from SPS controls, will continue to be exempt from these controls except, for example, exempt composite products. So all imports of animal products that are subject to SPS controls must enter GB via a point of entry with a border control post designated for that type of commodity. Documentary and risk-based identity and physical checks for medium risk products will begin to take place at BCPs. There will be no routine checks for low-risk animal products. These will be subject to intelligence-led interventions. Imports from non-EU or EFTA rest of world countries. Traders will see a simplification of imports from non-EU countries, including the removal of health certification and routine checks on low-risk animal products, which will be subject to import notifications and intelligence-led interventions. There will be a reduction of physical and identity checks on medium-risk animal products from non-EU risk assessed countries. Next slide, please. So what actions will traders need to take? If you're an importer, a person responsible for the load for EU and EFTA imports, you'll need to check that your chosen point of entry has a border control point, or BCP, designated for the product you are importing. Make sure you are following the correct process for the type of product you are importing, and all this guidance is on gov.uk. We've updated and clarified the guidance, so do visit gov.uk. Make sure all required documentation is provided, so including uploading health certificates and IUU documents to the import notification created and submitted in IPAFS, and Phyllis where used by the Port Health Authority or port. Make sure all relevant contact details are included in the import notification in case the consignment is called in for checks at the border control posts, particularly the person responsible for the load and the transporter. So focusing now on the island of Ireland. Qualifying Northern Ireland goods, or QNIGs, will continue to have unfettered market access whether they moved directly from Northern Ireland to GB or indirectly via Ireland. They can enter GB via any point of entry. From the 30th of April, non-EU goods and goods arriving in England directly from mainland EU must arrive via a point of entry with a suitably designated BCP and will undergo the risk-based controls in the border target operating model. From the 30th of April, non-qualifying Northern Ireland goods, so non-QNIGs, and other goods arriving in Great Britain from Ireland will undergo risk-based document checks with full controls, but this will not commence earlier than the 31st of October 2024. We continue to work with the devolved governments across the UK to agree an implementation date for physical and identity checks at West Coast BCPs. As soon as we have a firm date, we will communicate this collaboratively, ensuring that traders have sufficient time to prepare. We are proposing that from the 30th of April, non-QNIGs and other goods arriving in Great Britain from the island of Ireland should arrive via point of entry with a suitably designated BCP or a small number of exempt points of entry where a BCP is planned. Further details will be confirmed as soon as possible. Border control posts and charging from the 30th of April 2024. So a border control post is an inspection post designated and approved in line with GB legislation for carrying out checks on animals and animal products, plants and plant products arriving from third countries at the GB border. Checks are carried out to protect animal, plant and public health and animal welfare. BCPs designated for specific products and temperature requirements have staff specially trained in handling these products. So we have a link there to more information on importing live animals or animal products at these UK border control posts. So some BCPs, there are a variety of BCPs that will have specific designation codes. We've listed some here for you. So POA is to specify products of animal origin, composite products, germinal products, animal byproducts, hay and straw. PNAO are products of non-animal origin, HC are products for human consumption or POAO. NHC are products not for human consumption, for example, ABP. NT means no temperature requirement. T, frozen chilled products. TFR means frozen products. TCH are chilled products, and some BCPs have additional specifications. So, for example, packed products only, fishery products only, liquid in bulk only. So that should be useful for you finding out the appropriate BCP. We do have here, you can see the link at the bottom of the page, UK border control posts for animal and animal product imports. Click on that and you'll find more details. I have an example here on the chart for Tilbury, but that's just an example. And the BCP map will be subject to further updates as new BCPs are approved. So you'll be able to go to the BCP map that will be linked on gov.uk and find out which BCP you can use. So charging at border control posts. So government-run border control posts, privately run BCPs, local authorities and port health authorities can apply charges for the inspection of animal products. These charges will cover the running and managing costs of the examination facilities, as well as other costs, including the positioning of consignments ready for inspection. For the government-run BCPs, we have the proposed Common User Charge, or CUC. This is the proposed charging model aimed to recover operating costs for government-run border control posts, or BCPs, in England ahead of the implementation of the 30th of April SPS controls in the UK. The proposed CUC charge will apply to all eligible imports, whether or not the import is selected for the physical check at a government-run BCP in England. It's proposed to administer a flat rate levy on every sanitary and phytosanitary consignment, plant and plant products and animal products, which has entered GB through the Port of Dover or Eurotunnel shuttle, and which is eligible for BCP checks. And the charge applies whether the consignment is selected for a check or not. There's been a consultation, as you know, over the summer, and we will be publishing the government response to the consultation as soon as possible. Next slide, please. So for private sector companies that operate BCPs, for example, at airports and maritime ports, they can levy charges for services, but this is a commercial decision for each BCP operator. So traders, you'll need to contact them directly for details of their charging fees. For the Animal Plant Health Agency, or APHA, this is the competent authority with responsibility for the inspections of plants and plant products at BCPs and control points. It has separate charges for official controls and checks on live animals, plants and plant products. And we've given you the link there for APHA's inspection fees. For the Port Health Authority, they can charge for official controls undertaken on animal products, high-risk food not of animal origin, and certain certification checks on fish, fish products, and organic products. PHAs set their own charges for these inspections, and fees will continue to be calculated, set, and collected and published by individual port health functions. The checks will continue to be financed by charges on a full cost recovery basis. And the fees will be calculated for low risk, medium risk and high risk category commodities, so the charge is proportionate to the level of risk and the control activity. Traders can find the detail of Port Health Authority charges on each relevant Port Health Authority website. So a little more on the checks and inspections from the 30th of April. As you know, there are different types of checks that can be carried out on consignments at a BCP. So there's the documentary checks that will often be conducted remotely ahead of arrival to the BCP. This is a check that the document requirements have been met, for example, where a health certificate is required, and any documents provided about the consignment must be consistent with the import notification. There's the identity check, which is a check that the commodity's identification marks, stamped, and other necessary product and/or package information conform to the declaration on the health certificate and documentation. Physical checks are where the inspector physically examines the product. So it may include sampling the product to look for pathogenic microorganisms or illegal contaminants such as veterinary drugs, residues, or heavy metals. For transit checks, some consignments in transit through GB or using GB as a land bridge may require official seals to be checked on entry to GB. For germinal products from the EU. As we know, germinal products are high-risk animal products and are already subject to import controls. So from the 30th of April 2024, germinal products will be required to enter GB via an appropriately designated border control post, BCP. So germinal products will be required to enter GB via an appropriately designated border control post, or BCP. The relevant port health authority will conduct 100% documentary, ID and physical inspections on germinal products at the BCP. IUU documentation. So the UK's illegal, unreported and unregulated IUU fishing requirements came into effect for EU imports from January 2021 to help combat IUU fishing. IUU fishing documentation, so catch certificates, processing statements, evidence of storage, must be sent in advance for all relevant imports to the Port Health Authority. These will need to be uploaded to IPAFs from the 30th of April 2024. IUU documentation may also need to be uploaded to the Port Health Interactive Live Information System, or PHILIS, for PHAs and LAs who operate this system. Please contact the Port Health Authority to find out how far in advance you need to send these documents. The minimum timings set in the legislation are 72 hours in advance for imports by sea, 4 hours by rail or air, and 2 hours by road. IUU risk-based checks are separate to SPS inspections. Next slide, please. So, from the 30th of April, customs declarations. HMRC and DEFRA systems cross-check the CHED import notification and customs declaration for consignment. To make sure the consignment is cleared, if no SPS or non-SPS customs inspections required, and to avoid it being directed to a BCP when it may not need to, from 30th of April, take these 5 steps for consignments entering GB from the 30th of April 2024. Firstly, submit the CHED import notification in advance of the consignment arriving in GB. Double check the customs declaration before submission. Correct CHED import notification reference in the correct format with the correct document code. From the 30th of April, you will be able to copy and paste them directly from IPAFs. Thirdly, check the commodity codes and net weight for the consignment are consistent and match in both. After the customs declaration is submitted, check and continue to check the IPAF's dashboard, your customs software or CDS, and your email inbox for error messages. Fix errors in the customs declaration quickly before the consignment reaches the departure port. So what happens after the checks? Well, after the checks have been completed, the results will be recorded on the import notification. If the consignment is compliant with the SPS controls applied and has customs clearance, it is free to continue to the destination. If the consignment is found to be non-compliant, the PHA will contact you with information about the actions you may need to take, such as re-export, destruction, remedial action, or use of the consignment for another purpose in some permitted cases. So now we have the second poll. Thank you so much for answering the first poll. The question for the second poll, again, very important that you get involved in this. The question is, thinking about the changes your organisation might need to make for the introduction of border checks on the 30th of April, please indicate if you or your organisation are working on or have completed any of the following checks. So you have a range of answers there. Just tick on one and submit. So thinking about the changes your organisation might need to take for the introduction of border checks for the 30th of April, please indicate if you or your organisation are working on or have completed any of the following actions. So we have a range of actions there. Just press submit. Thank you. So moving on to transits, we have a link there for transiting animals and animal products through Great Britain on the gov.uk website. Next slide, please. So for land bridge transits that are low risk goods, so for low risk animal products using GB as a land bridge, for EU and EFTA countries, you'll need to pre-notify on IPAFs. You will need to enter and exit via a point of entry with a designated BCP from April 2024. You'll need commercial documents, but no health certificates or routine checks will now be required, although you may be subject to non-routine or intelligence-led checks from April 2024. For rest of world goods that are low risk, process will remain as now, pending further risk assessment. Please note our land bridge definition is this. Land bridge transits are the movement of goods from one country to another third country via Great Britain. The goods move through but do not stay in GB. Next slide, please. So for medium risk products using GB as a land bridge, so for EU and EFTA goods, you'll need to pre-notify on IPAFs, including uploading an export health certificate. And from the 30th of April 2024, all consignments must be sealed. So there'll be 100% documentary checks and ID seal checks on entry or integrity of seal exit by PHAs that will begin. Checks will be risk-based and check rates will align with those applied to imports into GB. Goods will need to enter and exit via a port with a BCP designated to check them. For rest of world goods, the process will remain as is for now, pending further risk assessment. So looking now at land bridge transits for goods that are transiting to GB from Ireland. The requirements for certification and pre-notification will apply to EU and non-qualifying Northern Ireland goods transiting from Ireland through GB to the EU, although the timelines for commencing checks at BCPs will be slightly different. So for medium risk animal products using GB as a land bridge, there will be no ID or physical checks on goods arriving at GB directly from the island of Ireland until the 31st of October 2024 at the earliest. This means from the 30th of April 2024 until this date is determined, there will be no entry seal checks when EU and non-qualifying Northern Ireland goods leave the island of Ireland and enter via GB points of entry to transit to the EU. There will also be no exit seal checks when EU goods transit GB and use GB ports to move to the island of Ireland. So this is the last question on the poll. Do get involved. It's really important for us to help us understand where you're at and where we could most help you and to tailor our communications for you. So the question is coming up now on your screen. How confident are you that your organisation will be ready for the import controls that will be introduced from the 30th of April? So you just need to indicate there your level of confidence and press submit. Don't think too hard, just top of mind feeling and press submit. This really has helped us to understand where traders are at and to direct our resources in terms of communications appropriately. So further resources and engagement. We have the Business Readiness Forum, as you know, that's a fortnightly meeting for GB, EU and EFTA stakeholders to receive updates on specific biosecurity, borders and trade-related cost-cutting and operational issues. It offers a chance to listen in on teachings from the programme and to raise questions. For more information and joining details, there's the email there. And there's also a link there for our further webinars on Eventbrite that we hope will guide you through the 30th of April milestones. So the link there takes you to the collection of webinars we are holding over the next few months. We also have a number of business leaflets and video guides already on gov.uk. There's a link there to download them from gov.uk. Follow the link there. We have some photos of them here: export health certificates leaflet, import notifications leaflet, border control post, plant leaflet, and very soon a POAO leaflet for BCPs. And we have several composite decision trees to help you find out information about your products. And all previous recordings of training sessions are on the AFA YouTube website. Next slide, please. So do look out for our next webinars. We've got one next week, which will be step by step on the 12th of March. And then we have another one towards the end of March and 2 more in April. So a little bit of information to update you from the border control posts themselves. As you know, if you were a trader and your products were stopped for inspection, you will have received an individual summary about that, but we've collated all the information together so that we can use this as an educative process for other traders. So we've put together the common errors and how to rectify them. So firstly, one of the common errors was low risk consignments with no accompanying commercial documents. So our guidance on this is that low border target operating model risk category consignments must come with relevant commercial documents from the supplier. So you do not need to provide a health certificate, but you do need to provide the relevant commercial documents from the supplier. Low-risk consignments will not be subject to routine documentary identity and physical checks. However, from the 30th of April 2024, checks may still be undertaken where intelligence indicates a specific risk. Another common error was that multiple health certificates were attached to one single pre-notification. Our guidance on this is that generally each health certificate should be attached to a single import notification. This means a mixed load containing multiple medium risk goods should have multiple import notifications. Compound products So a compound product is a single product containing medium risk POAO, which does not meet the definition of a composite. So compound products would be treated differently, and further guidance on compound products is coming shortly. Next slide. So another common error is that the attestation was incorrectly deleted on the EHC. So our guidance on this is to check attestations are completed in accordance with the model certificate notes for completion, and all non-applicable attestations are correctly deleted or omitted from the certificate. Deletions carried out by hand must be initialed and stamped. If completed electronically as a verifiable PDF, the signature and stamp per page is sufficient. Another common error is that signature errors on the export health certificate. So our guidance is that if a paper certificate is used, it must bear the signature and the stamp of the certifying officer. Verifiable PDF certificates must bear a valid digital signature. Another error is that pages are not numbered or numbered incorrectly on the export health certificate. So our guidance is that all pages of the certificate must be sequentially numbered. So make sure your numbering is sequential. Finally, another common error was that there was no regionalisation code provided on the EHC, on the export health certificate. So if a product is subject to regionalisation measures, you must include the correct regionalisation code as selected from the list on gov.uk, and we have a link there to regionalisation codes. So now I'll pass you over to my colleague Olu Adedokin. We're looking at the pre-submitted Q&A. I hope that was useful, and we're hoping now to answer as many questions as we can from that you have pre-submitted and those that you've put onto the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I don't know if John, do you want to take this one, or I'm happy to take it.
Thanks, Richard. I think Olu's going to walk us through and assign them, but I can talk to the first question for sure. So will low risk goods have to go through a designated BCP even if they're not subject to controls, i.e. They don't require an export health certificate? The answer to that is yes. Low risk animal products will need to enter Great Britain via a point of entry with a designated border control post for the type of product from the 30th of April, with the exceptions around the island of Ireland that have been talked about previously in the presentation. The reason for that is because, legally speaking, low risk animal products are subject to SPS controls, even though they're not subject to regular inspections or routine inspections under the Border Target Operating Model. We will, on certain occasions, or PHAs will on certain occasions, want to undertake intelligence-led checks on these goods, and it's important that for that purpose they enter via a point of entry with the relevant designated border control post. Olu, do you want me to cover the second question on the slide as well before you pick up? Lovely, thank you. So what documents will be asked for with low risk goods? So it is important that low risk goods are accompanied by commercial documentation. That's been referenced in the presentation previously. The contents of that commercial documentation we've set out on gov.uk, and I've linked to in the Q&A section already in response to a question that has been asked there. We don't specify exactly what format that commercial documentation needs to be in, but needs to be uploaded to the IPAS notification, as has been stressed already in the presentation. We are looking at providing more guidance on how the low risk import process works, and exactly what details should be included where, because it's an area where we're getting quite a lot of queries. So we're looking at further guidelines on that might be helpful.
Thanks, John. We'll move on to the next question, and I'll give that to Richard, please. Will paper EHCs continue to be accepted indefinitely, or is there an estimated date when all EU suppliers should be using traces?
Brilliant, thanks. Currently, we've got no plans to turn off the ability to use paper EHCs. However, we would strongly advise that people make use of the PDF approach that is available within Traces. That has certain advantages in terms of being able to change errors fairly quickly by providing replacement certificates, and it will also speed up the process of documentary checks prior to the arrival of the goods. It is worth noting that we will be providing an allowance for the use of scanned copies of paper certificates in the short term, but in the longer term, if a paper certificate is used, there will be a need to physically drop that off at the BCP. That is not the case where we use a verifiable PDF version of a certificate. So using that electronic version will substantially speed up the process for going through a BCP in the future.
Thank you. Next question, if you could take this one. Does an approved establishment of origin need completing for low-risk products or only for medium and high-risk products?
Yeah, so this is in relation to the pre-notification. Yes, the approved establishment of origin should be specified on that pre-notification for low-risk products. There are certain products, particularly composite products, where there isn't a requirement always for the actual product to originate from an approved establishment, but the components within that product still need to originate from an approved establishment. Process is going to be slightly different for those composite products, and again we are looking at providing further guidance on that. But as a general rule, yes, low risk products need to include an approved establishment of origin in the pre-notification.
Thank you. Next question, John, if you could also take that one. How can we get derogation from 24 hours to 4-hour notification?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things that are worth clarifying here. The default pre-notification time under legislation is 1 working day, not 24 hours. It's not quite the same thing, although many border control post-port health authorities that operate the rest of the world do operate 24 hours. The facility exists for BCPs to derogate from that 1 working day pre-notification time down to a maximum of 4 hours, and how they do that is a matter for them, and equally, if they want to do that, is a matter for them. The feedback from industry around the practicality on certain routes of a 1 working day pre-notification period is understood, and we're working with port health authorities to understand what they plan to do in terms of offering potential derogations for certain consignments on certain routes for the end of April, and looking to be able to communicate as much detail on their plans as possible.
Thank you, John. The next question to John also. We have POAO that currently comes through Dover, but they don't have a BCP. So where will this load have to go instead in order to pass through a BCP?
Yeah, so DEFRA have clearly outlined our intention that the Sevington Border Control Facility will be the designated BCP for animal products entering Great Britain through the Port of Dover and through Eurotunnel. So if the consignment is required to report to a border control facility for inspection, it will be directed to the Sevington Border Control Facility that is currently going through the process of approval.
Next question to Richard. Can IUU notifications be sent to port authorities separate from the IFAS notification?
Thanks. So from the end of April, we will be expecting that an IUU notification will be attached to the IPAFS notification. We are also sort of saying that where Phyllis is used within a Port Health, the Port Health may also ask that the same notification be attached to a Phyllis declaration as well.
Thank you, Richard. Moving on to the next question. This is also for you, Richard. We have been importing animal byproducts from France using fast parcel full service DHL Express until the BTOM was implemented. We would like to continue sending our low and medium risk products using DHL. However, they are not able to provide us transport details due to confidentiality policy. However, they encourage importers to complete the pre-notifications by themselves. Is there a different way to complete the IFAS notification for fast parcel services in which we would not need to enter all transport details? Is DEFRA planning to do any changes in the IFAS system for submitting the pre-notifications for shipment being shipped with fast parcel service? Sorry, that's quite a long one.
It is quite a long one. We are talking to the fast parcels industry to understand their position. Currently, we are not intending to change the IPAFS pre-notification period for the beginning of April. It is worthwhile noting that the conditions that fast parcel operators apply to the movement to POAO is a local decision for them to make. The BTOM itself does not prohibit the movement of POAO through fast parcels. However, it's worth also highlighting that we will be publicising the imports requirements for personal imports in the next week or two, and that will set out what it is possible to bring in through the fast parcel system under the personal imports arrangements. So it's worth keeping an eye out for that one.
Thank you, Richard. The next question. What are the rules for ship provisions, cruise vessels, delivery from EU to UK? John, are you able to take that one?
Yes, I can do. So ship supply movements that enter Great Britain at one port of entry and depart on a ship from another port of entry are treated as transit movements and follow the broad transit process that has been outlined in this presentation earlier, with the controls and documentation required being determined by the risk category of the good that is moving for the purposes of ship supply. There are some specific nuances to this process, particularly around the way in which these goods exit GB, and we are putting on a specific webinar for businesses with an interest in ship supply movements at the end of March. If you are one of those interested businesses, please contact the BBTB Business Readiness Forum, and we can put the address in the chat for the meeting, or the Q&A for the meeting, so people have access to that, and request attendance at that session, because, as I say, there are some specific elements of the process that it's worth running through with those stakeholders in particular.
Thank you, John. The next question. I need a precise definition of products of animal origin. John, are you able to do that one?
Yes. So products of animal origin is a legally defined term. Essentially, it's any animal product that is produced for human consumption, as opposed to animal byproducts, which are used for purposes other than human consumption. If helpful, we can dig out the legislative reference and point attendees to it. But where we talk about products of animal origin, we're talking about products for human consumption, as opposed to those which are not.
Great, thanks, John. So that is the end of the pre-submitted Q&A. So we'll move on to some of the questions in the Q&A. So I'll just start. Can you confirm when the Trusted Trader scheme will begin? John, can you take that?
Sorry, struggling to find the mute button. Yes, so For animal products, we are piloting or proposing to pilot 3 Trusted Trader Scheme modules. The first of those commenced at the end of January and looks at the certification process. So that is the certification logistics pilot. We have 2 more modules where we are going through the co-design process at the moment, or the evaluation and co-design process, I should probably say, and intending to commence pilots or testing at the end of April. The first of those is the checks away from the border module. So that will look at how businesses that have been selected to participate can undertake checks at their own premises of destination in GB instead of, but with the same outcome as, checks being undertaken at border control post. A small number of participants have already been selected from an open competition that we ran back in the autumn to take part in that pilot, and we're working with them at the moment to understand how that initial set of pilots from April 30th will work. The aim currently is to dual run those with official controls. The second module that we're looking to commence from the end of April is the journey assurance module. This looks at where businesses can provide us with data that substitutes part of what we would expect to gain from an official control post at official control at a border control post. And again, we've gone through an initial application process, currently evaluating those applications with the aim of beginning initial testing with a small number of participants at the end of April, whilst official controls are undertaken at the same time. The aim very much being to build the pilot proposals with those selected participants from there. There's quite a lot more information on the various Trusted Trader modules that we're piloting for animal products on gov.uk. Obviously, if those initial pilots and testing phases prove to be successful and give us confidence that we are getting the same level of outcome as we would from official controls, we'll look at how those pilots could be expanded. But as they are pilots, if they do not provide us with that assurance, we will obviously look to act accordingly and bring them to a close. So there is further work still to do to determine the future of all of those pilot proposals, and we're working very closely with a number of people who we've selected through those EOI processes to do that.
Thank you, John. Moving on to the next question. What is the definition of a compound product? John, would you like to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this has come up a few times in the chat as we have been going through the webinar. Nikki did mention compound products as part of the collective feedback, but I think it's worth expanding a little more. So from the perspective of products of animal origin, a compound product is a product, a single product that contains more than one type of POAO, but is not a composite product, doesn't meet the legal definition of a composite product. And there are a couple of reasons why that might be the case. So that it might be the case because the POAO hasn't been processed. It might be the case because any plant component in the product doesn't fundamentally alter the characteristics of that product. So a classic example of a compound product is a fish that has been packaged with a piece of flavored butter, for example. There are 2 types of POAO there. There's not a fundamental component of the product that's plant-based, so that is a compound product. Where compound products are imported into GB under the target operating model, the basic principle is that each medium risk component of that product requires a health certificate. Any low risk component of that product under the TOM risk categorization does not require a health certificate and just requires commercial documentation. So in the fish example, depending upon the origin of the fish, that could be medium risk and therefore would require a health certificate. The butter so long as it's made from pasteurized milk, is likely to be low risk and would not if it's originating from the EU. This is so you'd need one health certificate there. Obviously, there are variations on this depending on precisely what the product is. The other key thing to understand around compound products is the process for pre-notification. So compound products are the exception to the rule that one EHC should be attached to one pre-notification. If you are pre-notifying a compound product, a single product, as I say, with multiple different types of POAO, and it has multiple health certificates because those types of POAO are all medium risk, you should still do so on one pre-notification. There is guidance coming out on this. Appreciate that that is overdue from the perspective of a number of stakeholders, so we're working to get that out as soon as we possibly can. But hopefully that provides some clarity on the basics of compound products.
Thank you, John. Next question. Where can I find the approval company number if we are importing low-risk products? Low-risk products are without health certificates. Yeah.
So I think two things to say here. First thing is that your exporter in the EU should be able to provide their approval number. And we provided guidance prior to the 31st of January setting out that this would be required and that businesses should take the necessary steps to obtain the information. In our pre-notification leaflet, there are some guidelines around doing that, but also lists of approved establishments in the EU are available on gov.uk or via gov.uk, links back to the traces list management system. So that guidance is also in the pre-notification leaflet that Nikki mentioned during the presentation, and we can reshare that if helpful. When you submit your pre-notification on the iPass system, the system should automatically pull across establishments from the traces database. If that's not happening, there are a couple of reasons. So one relates to a small subset of establishments where the system is not currently pulling that information across. That's being addressed and should be updated in the next 10 days or so. Perhaps more likely is that the establishment in the EU country of origin has not been uploaded to traces by the EU member state. And it's always worth checking with your exporter to make sure they are confident that the establishment has been properly uploaded onto the traces system, because there are in places differences between the national lists that EU member states maintain and that those which are recorded on the traces system. There's been quite a protracted dialogue between DEFRA and the European Commission and member states about this issue.
Thank you, John. So we have time for just one last question. So I think, well, John, you've already touched on this already, but someone asked if you could provide some examples of compound and composite products.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned an example of a compound product. An example of a composite product. So a composite product is one that contains processed products of animal origin and a plant component that does more than add flavoring or provide technical processing aids. So a lasagna is a good example of a composite product. Often will contain multiple types of products of animal origin, plant components which form a fundamental part of the product itself. The flavored butter is a good example of a product which, whilst it contains a processed product of animal origin and a plant component, would not be a composite product because the plant component is just adding a flavoring.
Thank you, John. So we will end the session there.